Should the Miami Heat trade for PJ Tucker and create a reunion with him? And should the Miami Heat trade away Caleb Martin? Those are the two main topics we're going to discuss on today's show, as we are very, very close, under 48 hours away from the NBA trade deadline. I am Nic Rohloff. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Be covered, because we got the Heat trade rumors and news leading up to the NBA trade deadline, which is officially 3 p.m. Eastern time on February 8th, which is Thursday afternoon. Make sure you are subscribed, because we're not going to go anywhere. We're also going to be live later tonight if you're watching this on Wednesday for a Heat watch party against the Spurs. So hit that sub button and lock us in here at the Heat Report. All right, let's talk about PJ Tucker, because the latest NBA trade rumors suggest that PJ Tucker is looking for a trade, which is no surprise. And it also shouldn't be a surprise that he apparently wants to join the Miami Heat. Brett Siegel of Clutch Points has a little nugget on PJ Tucker. Tucker, who is looking to find a team wanting to utilize his services right now, would welcome a reunion with the Heat, sources said. However, Miami's financial situation would make pursuing his $11 million contract almost impossible. To me, this should come as no surprise in any facet, whether it be PJ Tucker looking for a trade, and it should also not come as a surprise that he would want to rejoin Miami. It also shouldn't come as a surprise as it being impossible for the Heat to acquire his $11 million salary as it currently stands. I'd have to do more research on it. I believe the Heat could sign PJ Tucker if he is bought out, and would be my top priority and top target in the buyout market post-trade deadline, because I like what PJ could bring to this team from a veteran leadership standpoint, some spot minutes defensively potentially, and he has familiarity in this Heat system playing alongside Jimmy, Bam, and under Coach Eric Spoelstra. And that veteran leadership that I mentioned is something that Miami has kind of sorely missed, with Udonis Haslem no longer being on this bench. Even though he didn't play, he was still very, very effective in his role, which is why I always respect UD, even though other fan bases tried to clown on our guy. Before we talk about PJ Tucker more in depth here and what he can do for the Miami Heat, would you welcome back PJ Tucker to Miami? If you would, type Y for yes. If you would not welcome PJ back and want him to stay away from the Miami Heat, type N for no. It's today's pinned comment. So get your votes down in the comment section. After this YouTube ad break, I will explain what my thoughts are and give my final answer. I do want to make note, before we get more into Tucker, that PJ hasn't played since November 27th. He played in the first 11 games that he got dealt from Philly to LA. Remember, he started the year with the Sixers. James Harden and him were dealt to the Clippers in that massive blockbuster deal back in early November, and then he played the entire month of November. And then that final game that the Clippers played on the 27th, well, after that, PJ did not get any PT for the Clips. We saw him on the bench when the Clippers came to Miami just a couple days ago. And listen, is Tucker going to be this elite addition that's going to provide an unbelievable offensive spark and honestly a defensive spark? Probably not. But what Tucker can bring is a veteran toughness and leadership to this Heat locker room, this Heat bench, that has not been the case this season, thus far at least, because Udonis Haslem has left. This is the first year the Heat haven't had Udonis Haslem on their bench in damn near 20 years. I think you could tell at times this Heat team has lacked the toughness, the camaraderie that this team has always had, especially in the Jimmy Butler era. I don't think the toughness that we've always seen, I hate to keep saying the word toughness, but that is the word that the Heat like to use, discipline. We're tougher than you. That's their mantra. That's the Heat culture mantra. I feel like they've lacked that at times this season. And Tucker, even if he was signed in the buyout market for this team, sure, he's not going to be a stat monster, but he's going to do the little things in the locker room, keep people's minds right, coach, teach. That's the type of stuff he will bring. And Tucker played in 71 games, if you remember, with Miami in 2021 when the Heat had the best record in the Eastern Conference, the number one seed. It was also Kyle Lowry's first year as well, but Tucker played a pivotal role, starting as the power forward alongside Jimmy and Bam. shooting a career high in three-point percentage and almost in field goal percentage as well. PJ Tucker was very, very valuable for the Miami Heat in 2021, and it was a big and large reason why the Heat had the best record in the East and was one shot away from making it to the NBA Finals that season, which would have been, in hindsight, the third year of the last 4 seasons. And that's why I'll say I'll take Tuck back in the buyout market. I'm not trading for him because you'd have to give up someone like Duncan Robinson to match salary. Not doing that for PJ Tucker. So there's really no salary you can match with PJ unless you trade Caleb Martin, Drew Smith, and Thomas Bryant. But why would you trade 3 players for PJ Tucker? It's just not going to happen. And the Clippers are going to say no to that because they don't want to take on 3 guys that aren't really going to play for them outside of Caleb Martin potentially. So I don't really see a deal coming. I don't really see a deal happening. Let's just say that between Miami and LA for PJ Tucker. I do think he'll get bought out if another team doesn't trade for him, and I'll absolutely take PJ Tucker on the buyout market. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, the #1 daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Head to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS to get a first deposit match up to $100. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. Just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can watch the winnings roll in. These are my picks from last night's game against the Orlando Magic. I came just short. Devastating for the program. Went 3 or 4, got more than Franz Wagner rebounds, more than Terry Rozier assists, and more than Jimmy Butler turnovers, correct. But Adebayo failed to get 20 points. That's the risk I ran, picking the demon mode, which is a little bit of a higher stat projection, but it also increases the payout potential if I get it correctly. But guess what? I'm still cooling because I got that $100 first deposit match when I went to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS, and you can too. That link is in the not live chat. That used to going live on the channel. It is in the comments and description of today's video. I'm kind of dead that I just said that. All right, let's move into the second portion of today's show, and that is Caleb Martin. Should Miami look to trade him before the February 8th trade deadline, which ends on 3 p.m. Eastern time that single day? And I've kind of been well documented saying that. Caleb, he was terrific against the Magic last night. 11 points, 3 rebounds, 5 of 9 shooting, 1 steal, 1 block. He started in this game. The Heat are 8-5 when Caleb Martin is starting. But I still think the Miami Heat need to trade Caleb. And it's not because of his play. Like, I'm not trading Caleb Martin because he is not playing well and the Heat need to upgrade from his spot. It's from other aspects of the NBA, which we'll dive into in a second. But the Athletic's John Hollinger actually kind of agrees with me here. He has this excerpt about Caleb Martin can opt out of his bargain deal for $7.1 million after the season. Meanwhile, Jaime Jaquez Jr. seems more than ready to inherit Martin's role in the starting lineup. If so, might the Heat be better off cashing in their Martin stock now, either for a cost-controlled player for next season or to replenish their limited draft equity? I have 2 thoughts on that quote from Hollinger. One, well, I had this note mentioned before Caleb Martin was inserted back into the starting lineup against Orlando, but he generally has not started for Miami. So the fact that Hollinger says inherit Martin's starting role, well, he's only started 13 games this year. Maybe it would be now, but he was not starting up until last night against Orlando. Number 2, I do agree with everything else he said. If you trade Caleb Martin away, now I don't know if I would be in on trading Caleb Martin just for a draft pick. Like trading him for a second-round pick, that doesn't seem like something I'd be willing to do. I'd rather just have Caleb's impact and postseason versatility that has proved so deadly over the past couple seasons for Miami. Jaquez would be able to replace him, though, if he was dealt to a different team, whether it be to get other players or just for something else. Jaquez's usage and value would go up, and Jaquez has shown the ability to handle that. I think Jaime would be able to do it with ease, and that's why I'm willing to trade Caleb Martin, because you're not going to be able to re-sign him in the offseason unless you go deep into the second apron of the tax, which, let's be honest here, folks, Mickey Arison and the Heat front office aren't going to go deep into the luxury tax and get taxed heavily in that second apron, as I just dropped my pen, for Caleb Martin. They would do it for an elite player. They're not doing it for Caleb Martin. So you're going to lose him for nothing this offseason, so you should probably cash in on that chip now, but I still don't know if I would trade him away for nothing. You make the call, though. Should the Heat trade Caleb Martin? Should they cash in on that asset now before it expires in the offseason when it feels like he evidently opts out of his $7 million player option? If you think they should trade him, type T. If you think they should keep him and ride it out for the rest of the season, type your case. Before we close out today's video, I do want to make a note. We are going to be live on Chat Sports for the NBA trade deadline. Be live at 11 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern, so noon, going through the entire deadline. So we'll be live from noon Eastern time through the 3 p.m. deadline. It will be myself, your boy, Nic Rohloff, and Harrison Graham live on our main Chat Sports channel. So not live on the Heat Report. We'll be live on the NBA Now channel at Chat Sports. But don't worry, if the Heat make a move, we will definitely have you covered with a video. So check us out over there. And if you want to see Rolly on that day, well, you know where to find me. This is your warning. I do have 5 trade targets that the Heat could look at, though, if they do deal Caleb Martin. And my favorite one that I discussed a little bit on live is this one right here. I've got 2 targets, both from the Brooklyn Nets. Sharpe, their backup center, and Dennis Smith Jr., their backup point guard. You can trade Caleb Martin in a second-round pick. Now, I don't know if the Nets would be willing to do this, but it works financially for both teams. Sharpe and Dennis Smith Jr. to Miami for Caleb Martin and a second-round pick. You cash in on the Caleb Martin stock. You give the Nets a chance to have bird rights to re-sign Caleb Martin as someone who could play alongside Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson or be their backup guy off the bench for the rest of the season and into the future. Miami gets their backup center and their backup point guard in Dennis Smith Jr. Sharpe backs up Bam. Dennis Smith Jr. backs up Rozier. DSJ is one of the best point-of-attack defenders in the NBA. He struggles with his offense, but could be an elite defensive guy down the stretch of games if needed. Sharpe can give you 7 to 8 boards in 15 minutes of play off the bench for Miami, provide more of a big man role instead of a floor spacing big like Kevin Love when Bam sits the bench. I love a Caleb Martin in a second-round pick to the Nets for Davion Sharpe and Dennis Smith Jr. I don't know if they would do it, but I'd be all in on that. Or you could do the traditional backup center, 1-for-1 potentially. Martin for Drummond straight up. I think that is a legit possibility as well. He's a free agent to be, Drummond. They get bird rights on Martin. I think that makes sense. Same thing goes for Obi Toppin. Don't know if the Pacers are going to retain Obi. His usage and volume has gone down ever since they acquired Pascal Siakam. Obi fits Miami perfectly at that power forward position. 6'9", super athletic, efficient, can shoot the rock 40+% from 3 this season. Maybe Obi Toppin slides into that starting power forward role, which he was doing for Indiana before they acquired Siakam. He's an restricted free agent this upcoming year. So maybe Indiana moves on from that. They get Caleb Martin, who's more of a experienced player in the postseason. The last guy I'll mention, Davion Mitchell, the point guard for the Kings, who could be a 1-for-1 here. The Kings don't really need Davion Mitchell, right? They've got guard play that off the bench and at the starting position that is very, very manageable. Miami could use another point-of-attack defender. Davion Mitchell would absolutely give you that. It's more of a 1-for-1 swap where you save maybe $1 million, but you get a guy who's more needed as a backcourt guy off the bench rather than Caleb Martin's front court presence. When you have Hawkes potentially being able to slot into that starting lineup, you bring Davion Mitchell off the bench. I think that could be an interesting play for Miami. But we'll have you covered on everything surrounding the Miami Heat up until that deadline, which passes at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Thursday, February 8th. And once that passes, we'll break down what the Heat didn't do. We'll also have the buyout targets for the Miami Heat as well. We'll have you covered with everything Miami Heat basketball. So hit that sub button. Go Heat. Make sure you tune into our watch party tonight as well if you're watching this on Wednesday against the San Antonio Spurs.